So here's a question. How many of us know that song? All right, most of us. All right, good. Well, great news for you guys this morning. Today's message is about money. Yay, right? Everybody's excited. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? I know what you're thinking. Pastor Dan, we've already had a message about giving. I'm tired of it. I don't want to hear any more about giving, okay? Well, here's the great thing, all right? Today's message is not about giving. It's about money. It's not the same thing, right? So when you hear money in church, you're automatically thinking of one thing, but there's actually a lot more to money than just what we give at church. So we are going to mention giving just a tiny bit in this sermon, but I promise you it's going to be very short and it won't be a big deal at all. Okay, so really what we're looking at today is we're looking at 4 basic components about money that the Proverbs tells us about, okay? So we're going to be we're going to be looking at the truth about wealth, all right? So, and I think I have a slide for that up here. Yes. We're going to be looking at the truth about wealth, the first thing. Then we're going to be looking at the truth about poverty. And then we're going to be looking at reasons for generosity. And then finally, we're going to look at warnings about greediness. All right, and we're going to see all those things from the book of Proverbs this morning. So, if you're following along with your YouVersion Bible app, like Jacob mentioned this morning, today's message is called Money. And we're going to be bouncing all over the Proverbs today, so watch me for the changes and try to keep up. So, before we hop into the text, I want to just remind you about what's going on in our series here. The theme of this series is more than just a fortune cookie, right? And we know that fortune cookies, they kind of deliver vague advice. They give us predictions and stuff like that. But the Proverbs are about a lot more than that. We're learning about wisdom, which begins with the fear of the Lord. It's all about godly knowledge and application and skill, okay? So I'm going to do something that we normally don't do, although I did do this last week. I'm going to give you the fill-in-the-blanks, and then we're going to break it down. Normally, we kind of go through the text, and then we do the fill-ins as we go. But today, we're going to start with the fill-in, and then we're going to go from there. So if you grab your Connect card, here's the first fill-in-the-blank. Wealth is a powerful thing that we must keep in perspective. Wealth is a powerful thing that we must keep in perspective. All right, so let's get some perspective then. Let's start by looking at Proverbs chapter 10, verse 15. It says, "A rich man's wealth is his strong city. The poverty of the poor is their ruin." Okay, it also says something similar in Proverbs 18:11. It says, "A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his imagination." Okay, so the first thing you really need to know about wealth, if you're going to gain perspective, is that wealth does have its advantages. There are good things that go along with wealth. This is telling us that wealth gives us some degree of security. It's not perfect, but it does give us some degree of security. And of course it does, right? We know that. There are lots of troubling situations where having money can help us to get out of the situation, right? If you're sick and you have money, you can pay the hospital bill. If your car breaks down, you can afford to pay to fix it. If you get thrown in jail, you can post bail, right? I mean, so having money when you get in trouble can be a good thing. But what else can money do? Well, in Proverbs 14:20, it says, "The poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich has many friends." That also says in Proverbs 19:6-7, it says, "Many seek the favor of a generous man, and everyone is a friend to a man who gives gifts. All a poor man's brothers hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursues them with words, but he does not have them." And the proverb about this situation is also right. When you're on top, everybody wants to be your friend, right? When you have something to offer, people want to know you. So the next thing we can learn is that money gives you a degree of favor with people. But you have to be careful about the type of friends that having money gets you. It's not always a good friend, right? Someone actually once said, "Money doesn't buy friends, it rents them." When you're out of money, your lease is up, okay? So there's a caveat to it. So getting friends because you have money is not necessarily the best thing, but there is still a benefit there to having more people be on your side because you have money, all right? Here's another one that we can see with wealth. Proverbs 22:7. It says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender." Now, this really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, right? Money gives you power. More money, more power. Elon Musk, right? He didn't like that Twitter was censoring people, so he bought it, okay? Regardless of how you feel about Elon Musk, it's hard to argue with the fact that he has money and that makes him powerful, right? His power comes directly from the fact that he has money. Now, I actually looked up, just for curiosity's sake, who are the 5 most powerful people in the world right now? According to Forbes, they say the most powerful person in the world right now is Xi Jinping, who happens to be worth about $1.2 billion. Okay? The second most powerful person in the world is Vladimir Putin. Now, if you ask Russia how much he makes, they'll tell you he makes $140,000 a year. I don't think so, because he owns 20 houses, 700 cars, 58 aircraft, and a personal train. So I don't know how much $140,000 is really going to buy that kind of stuff, all right? Third most powerful person in the world, Donald Trump, worth $2.6 billion. Keep going down the list of powerful people, and you're going to see Angela Merkel, you're going to see Jeff Bezos, Pope Francis, who's worth about $16 million even as the Pope, Bill Gates. So is it surprising to see that when you go down a list of powerful people, you're also going down a list of wealthy people? That shouldn't really surprise us, right? Because powerful people have money. Then the Proverbs gives us one more benefit of wealth. Proverbs 18:23. The poor use entreaties, but the rich answer roughly. You know, famous people can say really harsh things to people and get away with it. Poor people, though, have to be a little bit more careful if they're trying to get something, especially because the poor are often asking for money, right? So money gives you freedom to voice your opinion. Now, today, this has kind of turned around just a little bit because we have social media, right? When rich people say things they shouldn't say on social media, they get more scrutinized and they can be canceled. But then again, if you think about it, rich people often get canceled for things they said before they were rich. So it's not really that different. And honestly, poor people can get canceled just as easily. It's just that nobody cares, right? So you never hear about that. So really, even social media doesn't make it all that different. But rich people can be rude to wait staff or to maids or to cashiers or to employees or whatever, and they can get away with it because they're the ones with the money, right? While the workers have to be polite to them even if they go off. So I think it's obvious that wealth does have its advantages, okay? And if you want to say, well, no, money isn't that good. Well, there's a comedian named Daniel Tosh who's a very worldly comedian, and he has definite opinions about the classes in America. And he made a joke about money once. He said, money doesn't buy happiness. Do you live in America? Because it buys you a wave runner. You ever seen a sad person on a wave runner? In a sense, he's right. Money actually does buy you happiness. But the problem is, it's very limited. And that's because we have two things to worry about when it comes to wealth. It has its advantages, but there are two things we have to worry about. So here are the shortcomings of wealth. All right, Proverbs 11:4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. So money doesn't stop what death can do, right? Doesn't matter how much you make, you're still going to die. That's just reality. There's something throughout history where we see in all these different cultures, they're called grave goods. You've probably heard of them, right? Vikings and ancient Egyptians, they would go to their tombs of their rich people and load up the tombs with stuff for them to take into the afterlife. They'd put food or treasure or weapons or chariots or even living people have been buried with their dead rulers. Ying Zheng actually had an army of 8,000 terracotta warriors built for him to protect him in the afterlife. You know what the problem is with that, though? All that stuff is still here. It didn't go with them, assuming it hasn't already rotten away or been stolen or whatever, right? So at the very best, the truth is your riches are good for you here. Best case scenario. That's what you get out of them, okay? But even when you're here, money can only take you so far. Proverbs 11:28 says, whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. So here's the other problem we have to deal with money. The first thing is money doesn't stop death. The second thing is that money is disappointing. If you put your hope in money, you will be disappointed. Jess C. Scott, who's an author, she made the statement, you can never have too much money. And I think she's right. I don't know of any person that's been like, man, I just have too much money. Never heard that spoken by anybody, right? But if I was ever to make that statement, I would add one little detail to it, right? I would say, you can never have too much money, but you can also never have enough. There's never going to be enough money to make you happy, right? Think about the rich people we already talked about this morning. Vladimir Putin, struggling to beat Ukraine. Donald Trump, facing criminal charges. Twitter, or X, has lost 90% of its value. So do you think that those men, with all their riches, are satisfied? Probably not. I think they want more. You know, a reporter once asked John D. Rockefeller, who was America's first billionaire, he asked him, "Johnny, how much money is enough?" And Rockefeller said famously, "Just a little bit more." Just a little bit more. Proverbs 23, 4 through 5 says, "Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it is gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven." Don't waste your whole life pursuing money. Find rest, do other things, enjoy life, because money has a tendency to disappear. Money is something that for us as believers requires a balance. Yes, we should work hard. Yes, we should pursue wealth fairly. But we should also allow ourselves time for rest and to enjoy life. And we shouldn't put our hope in money. And see, the secret to avoid this struggle with where we put money and how we keep it in its place, the secret is a very simple solution. Don't put your hope in money, so change what you put your hope in. If you turn to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19, really this passage could summarize everything we're saying today. But it says this, 1 Timothy 6:17, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life." See, this passage doesn't tell rich people, if you're in the church, throw all your money away. Instead, it says take that money that you have and use it for good, to do things that will actually be worth it in the long run. So if God gives you money, he has an expectation that you will use it for his glory, to help other people. And honestly, that goes for money, but that goes for whatever God gives us, right? Whether it's talent or power or brains or money. If God blesses us with it, we should use it for his glory. So instead, this passage is telling us, don't put your hope in money. Having it and using it for good is great, but your hope has to be in God. Your hope has to be in God. It's okay to work hard and to provide a good life for your family. It's okay to provide some security for your future, a little bit extra to have so that you can enjoy some things. It's not a sin to go on vacation or to buy a new car. But don't let the pursuit of that stuff rule over you, okay? So that's the first financial truth. That's putting wealth into perspective. So let's look at the next financial truth. Let's put poverty into perspective. Here's your fill in the blank for this section. Poverty isn't always self-inflicted, but it can be. Poverty isn't always self-inflicted, but it can be. See, unfair circumstances do exist, okay? Sometimes people are poor because something unfair happened to them, all right? Proverbs 30:14 says, "There are those whose teeth are swords, whose fangs are knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, the needy from among mankind." So some people are so greedy that they will drive other people into poverty, okay? I had an interesting conversation with my flight instructor one time, and I think I've told you this story, but it's been a while, so here we go again. But my flight instructor was an agnostic, so he was questioning things about God. And at Cable Airport, where I was getting my flight lessons from, as soon as we, came off after takeoff, we'd fly over a homeless encampment there. And one time we were there, and we were flying, and he looked down, and he said, "Why would God allow that to happen to people? Why doesn't he help them?" And I said, well, there's a lot of reasons, but let me ask you something. I said, if God, let's say God, just for example, put enough wealth on the earth for all of us to live happily, but that meant that you couldn't have your new Mustang or your big house or eat your nice lunches all the time. You'd have to give that stuff up and live just a normal, fulfilled life, but everybody would have the same as you. There wouldn't be any more homeless. You guys would all be on the same plane. I said, imagine if that could happen. Would you do it? Would you give up your stuff? And without even thinking, he said, nope, no way. And I said, well, okay, so those people down there, they don't have nothing. They have shelter. They have clothing. I know they have food because our church feeds them. But I said, but here's the thing. As long as people want to take more for themselves, and God gives us free will, there's always going to be poor people. I said, honestly, it seems like you're blaming him for not doing something that you wouldn't even do yourself. And then he turned to me and he said, well, don't forget your flaps and maintain 55 knots through final. He just changed the subject and went on to the next thing. That was the end of the conversation. So some people have less because other people can't stop taking more. That's a fact. That's how our world works. Proverbs 28:8 tells us, though, whoever multiplies his wealth by interest and profit gathers it for him who is generous to the poor. Okay, so there's kind of another side to this here. Some people have more because they exploit people, right? Think about like elders who are broke. The elderly who are broke because scammers call and it's like, hey, we're going to fix some Medicare mistake, send us a check for $3,000, right? Or think about like all the banks that are rich because they charge fees and they arrange the transactions to make sure that, people are overdrawn and they can charge more late fees. And it's like, why? I went 30 cents in the negative. Why is my late fee $45, right? Think about mechanics that swindle people because the people that are bringing it to them don't know how cars work. So some people are poor for unfair reasons, right? But there are some people who are poor and they've earned it themselves by one or many of several possible reasons, okay? So what we need to know is poverty can certainly be earned as well. And now, of course, there's laziness. We talked about this last week, right? Proverbs 10:4 says, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Laziness is warned against several times in Scripture. We talked about it in Proverbs chapter 6, but there can be more than just laziness affecting you. Not every poor person is lazy. Proverbs 13:18 says, poverty and disgrace come to him who ignores instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is honored. So we can learn that stubborn, mule-headed people who won't listen also end up in poverty. I can give you a direct example. There was a friend of mine that I used to work with, and our supervisor kept telling him over and over and over again, you have to do the paperwork this way, or it's going to mess up the billing. But he kept blowing her off. He would tell, I know more, I was in the military, I put my life on the line, this job is nothing. And he just had that attitude. And then he got fired, right? Poverty came to him because he wouldn't listen to instruction. Proverbs 21:17 also tells us, whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. These are people who won't stop spending money on dumb stuff. I knew a guy one time who drove a very nice Cadillac, the V-Spec that had the Corvette engine in it. He owned a big house. He rode dirt bikes all the time. He threw crazy parties. And he spent all his money on that stuff, bragging about how rich he was. He bought into that mentality where they teach you sometimes, if you think like a rich man, you'll become a rich man, that kind of thing. And that's what he believed. And so he showed all these people all this wealth that he had, but then in private, he came to me and was like, hey man, can I borrow some money? It's like, I thought you were rich, man. What happened? Well, he blew it all. He threw it all away. And as far as I know, he doesn't own any of that stuff anymore. I think he just sells insurance now. I'm not really sure. But he's definitely not rich, I can tell you that. Most millionaires in this world are people that you would never even know are millionaires, right? The flashy ones are the ones that have the big car payments and maxed out credit cards and lots of stress in their life, right? But oftentimes, the people that have millions just look like regular folks. Here's another thing that'll cause you to be poor. Proverbs 23:21. It says, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. So people who are drunk all the time tend to lose money. Not only is drinking expensive, but living the lifestyle of a drunkard comes with a lot of bad things like divorce, DUI fines, medical bills, losing your job, right? And gluttony is a problem too. If you ever want to feel awkward, give a sermon about gluttony when you're a fat guy. That's fun. Here's the thing, some people overindulge on food so much that they can't even hardly move around. And I know, I probably look like a hypocrite for that one right now, and I'm not going to lie to you, it's a struggle for me, right? Don't get me wrong, I am a guy who likes to work. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you I'm always working on something, building this, fixing that, designing this, right? But I often think about how much more I could do if I was healthier, right? I don't like getting chewed out by my doctor. I don't like getting winded for no reason. I don't like having to buy new clothes every year because I fatted out of old ones, right? No, nobody likes that. And I've actually even been considering starting a new ministry here called Club 330, which would be a way for those of us in the church that want to be held accountable to losing weight to do it as Christians together. And it would definitely be encouraging to me, and if I headed it up, I would have no choice but to keep doing it, right? And a friend of mine came up with the name Club 330, and I thought it was hilarious because it would be based on John 3:30, and the verse says, he must increase, but I must decrease. So obviously that's not what that verse actually means, but I still think it's great. Anyway, if any of you would be interested in that, come talk to me after service. Let me know, because I think it would be a good thing. So, but anyway, the big takeaway from this section is this. Number one, some people are poor, and it's not their fault. We shouldn't condemn the poor because we oftentimes don't know their situation. We shouldn't encourage unfair treatment of others, especially for the sake of making money. And so that's the first thing. The second thing we need to know is that some people who are poor can actually change their circumstances, and they choose not to. And for those people, we should encourage them. If you are that person, you should avoid these things: laziness, foolishness, pleasure-seeking, drunkenness, and gluttony, okay? So let's break this down now. We're going to take a look at the two human sides of money, generosity and greed. So here's what we need to know about generosity, because generosity is both earthly and spiritual. That's your next fill in the blank. Generosity is both earthly and spiritual. So let's hop into a proverb about this. Let's see a little bit about the earthly issue, Proverbs 28:27. It says, "Whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse." So we have a responsibility to be generous on earth, okay? We also get rewards for that here. You know, I've been talking to my brother and one of my old mentors in California. His name is Jay. Jay is in his 70s, and he's filling in as a senior pastor for a church there. And when he first came in, he was looking at their budget, and he realized that they gave $0 to benevolence and to missions. And of course, he felt like this was the reason why the reason why they weren't giving money to missions and benevolence is because they felt like they didn't have enough money to do that. It wasn't their priority to be generous as a church. And so the first thing he did when he came in is he said, nope, we're going to start giving 10% just to start. And so they do now. They give 10% to benevolence and missions. And now they're paying that out, and their bills are paid, and it looks like God might even be working out a merger between them and my old church in California where my brother is leading. And so really, the question is that a result of them starting to be generous? Maybe, I don't know. But I'll tell you this, the scripture definitely gives us assurance that that is a possibility, that because they are generous, God is turning things around. Now, Proverbs also says in chapter 11, verse 17, it says, "A man who is kind benefits himself, but a cruel man hurts himself." So if you're kind, you reap good things. If you are not, you're actually hurting yourself, like Ebenezer Scrooge, okay? It might feel good to keep that extra money in your pocket, but in the long run, it costs you more. And the wording of this passage actually relates directly with the wording in 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 26. It says, "With the merciful you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man you show yourself blameless," talking to God. Saying if you show mercy, then God will show you mercy. But if you're selfish, well, then why does God need to help you? Because obviously you're already watching out for yourself. So we know generosity is an earthly issue, but it's also a spiritual issue. So let's look at the other side of this, the spiritual side. Is there a way to be spiritually generous with money? Of course there is. This is that little passage, this little section that I was telling you about that was coming about giving to church, all right? Proverbs 3:9 tells us, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce." So giving money to the church is a spiritual generosity. Even giving to parachurch organizations on top of your church giving is also spiritual generosity. And God asks us to give with the highest priority. That's why my mentor Jay told the church we are going to give to missions and benevolence first. We're going to be generous first with what we have, not just when we feel comfortable, all right? And with spiritual generosity comes spiritual reward. Proverbs 19:17 says, "Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed." So it is God who gives us the return when we are generous both to him and to other people, okay? Now that's all I'm going to say about giving this morning. That's not too bad, right? Pretty good. Just rip it off like a Band-Aid. All right. So for the last part, we're going to look at the opposite of being generous, all right? We're going to look at being greedy. So here's your last fill in the blank this morning. Greed only brings misery for ourselves and for others. The Bible paints a very not nice picture of greed. In Proverbs 30:14, we already read this, but we're going to go a little further this time. Proverbs 30:14 says, "There are those whose teeth are swords, whose fangs are knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, the needy from among mankind. The leech has 2 daughters, give and give. 3 things are never satisfied, and 4 never say enough. Sheol, the barren womb, the land never satisfied with water, and the fire that never says enough. So I think it's obvious that greed is bad for other people, right? In this picture, we see an image of greedy people. They have swords and knives for teeth, right? And they eat other people to take care of themselves. Essentially, they have the attitude of, I'm going to destroy you and everything around me just as long as I get what I want out of it, okay? And then they use this image of a leech sucking the blood of its victims, right? And it's insatiable, and it cries out, give it to me. And give me more, right? It says give twice. That's how insatiable it is. And actually, one commentary said that this is a picture of a horse leech that you can find in Israel, and it's a species that has 2 mouths on it, one to grip onto and the other one to suck the blood. Now, I couldn't find a picture of it, so I don't know if it's actually true, but that's what the old commentary said, okay? So it compares greedy people then to leeches, and it also compares greedy people to things that are never satisfied. It says that a greedy person is like death, like Hades, right? Hades never gets so full that people stop dying, right? It's like the womb, right? The earth is never too full for people to stop procreating. It just keeps making more, right? It's like land that you can never water so much that it will keep producing without ever asking for more water, right? You're always watering to bring forth more crops. And then it compares it to fire. And fire only stops burning when there is nothing less left to take or when it is forced to stop burning. If you keep giving it fuel, it will keep burning, right? It never quits. So greed is all about take, and making everything else around you desolate, all right? So greed is bad for others, but greed is also bad for ourselves. Greed doesn't do us any favors. As we alluded to when we played the song this morning, right, Money, we suggested that greed is not good. And there's a statement in the song which gets a little bit wrong, but it's also kind of a little bit right. Okay, so we sing, money, so they say, is the root of all evil today, right? And in a sense, though, right, because that is what people say, but it's not true in the sense that that's a misquote of Scripture, right? Here's what Scripture actually says. 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. So you see, money isn't the problem. It's a person's love for it that is a problem. The love of money, aka greed, makes us evil people. And just like so many other sins that we talk about in Scripture, it's not the object or the act that's the problem, it's the heart of the person that is the problem. So if you are greedy, your heart is the problem. So, I think we can all agree after looking at all this, all these different angles about money, that money is a powerful thing, and it can also be a good thing. But the real question about money doesn't come down to money itself. It comes down to you and your heart. Jesus said in Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so if you want to understand where you are, look at where your money is. Wherever your money goes tells you about where you are. Are you generous with it? Do you help the poor and the needy? Do you help the church? Are you okay with having less? Are you okay with working hard to get more? Or are you on the other side of that picture? Does money dictate everything you do? Are you greedy and selfish with your money? Do you turn your eyes away from the poor? Do you resent giving money to the church if you give it all? Is having less stuff a devastating thought to you? And do you always only look for the easy way out? So you got to ask yourself a question. What does money mean to you? Matthew 6:24, Jesus warns us, no one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So you got to make a choice, God or money. Which one will you serve? Because money comes down to you. Money should be something that we work for, and if God gives us more, we're thankful and we look for more ways to be generous with it. If we lose it, that's okay because it doesn't rule over us. It's God that we trust for our provision. And so as a church, let us use money the way that God intends and let our hearts belong to God rather than our bank accounts.